Welcome back, everyone. This is the final lesson in our memory chapter. Today, we'll be looking at the cognitive interview. First, we'll be looking at the elements that make up the cognitive interview, then move on to a study that measures the effectiveness of it, and then move into the evaluation that contains things like whether the cognitive interview can be improved and when it should be used. So these are the parts that make up the cognitive interview, and we'll now go through them step by step. Report everything. This refers to encouraging witnesses to not leave out any details. And you can imagine when you sit in front of a police officer having to report on a crime you just witnessed, you might not want to bore them with details that might not be relevant. So you really want to be helpful and only provide information that is important to the case. But maybe you're wrong. Maybe something that you deem irrelevant is actually really important. So police officers should encourage their witnesses to report everything. Second is reinstate the context. So we know that from the context-dependent cues that it's really helpful to imagine the situation, and that can act as a cue to help you remember this scene better. So if you were to close your eyes and go back to the scene of the crime, it might help you jumpstart your memory and access important information that would be hidden otherwise. Reverse the order refers to asking witnesses to recall the event backwards, from the last to the first event. That way, we break the logic chain that we very naturally build up in our heads to check whether our story actually makes sense. So a train of thought might be something like, all right, so first I was there and then I walked over the street and I must have done this and that, or else I wouldn't have made it onto the other side of the street. So what they're doing is they're filling in the gaps with memories that might be false. And so in order to avoid that from happening, you break the logic chain by making them, by forcing them to recall the event backwards. That way, they have less of an opportunity to fill in the gaps with false memories. The next item on our list is changing perspective. Now, our memories are obviously linked to the person we are, and that might change the memories in itself. So imagining the same situation from the perspective of somebody else allows us to separate the memory from who we are and make it therefore less biased. And finally, the enhanced cognitive interview, or ECI, sometimes called, is just a bunch of things that we can do to make the witness feel more comfortable and speak openly about their experience. So that might be to minimize the distractions in the room, to encourage them to speak slowly. Don't create time pressure. Give them the feeling that they can spend all the time they need on recalling the event. Make them feel comfortable. Build a relationship to them. Make them a cup of tea. Something to calm them down and to make sure that they report everything the way you want it. Now, this study tests the effectiveness of the cognitive interview. So what they did is they took 16 Florida detectives and split them into two groups, each 8 people. Half of them received cognitive interview training and the other ones didn't. Now, the result is that the cognitive interview group gained 63% more information from interviews after the training compared to the no cognitive interview group. That is amazing, 63% more information. You would say, well, all police officers should be actually doing this cognitive interview then. And Könken et al. Found the same. He did a meta-analysis of studies that looked at the cognitive interview, and that he found on average police officers that had the cognitive interview training produced 41% more correct information compared to the standard interviewees. Now, the counterpoint also from Könken is that actually the information was less accurate. Yeah, you had more information, but it was on average less accurate. And so the conclusion is that police officers need to be very careful with the data obtained, because yes, you are getting more. It's kind of like a fish trawler with a massive net that might catch turtles or something they don't want to catch. It's like versus a fishing rod that catches just that one fish, that big fish you want to get, but maybe missing out important information left and right? So you have to be very careful what you do with all that information, because many of it might actually be wrong or not relevant. This one's a kind of funny one. So Milne and Boll, they decided to compare two groups to each other. The cognitive interview versus a group that only did the first 2 steps, report everything and reinstate the context. And they found actually that the recall was better than the under just when taking the first 2 steps versus the entirety of the cognitive interview. So it suggests that there is still definitely room for improvement, and we should be looking at whether we could modify the cognitive interview, because apparently just the first 2 steps alone is better than all steps together. So let's look at some limitations of the cognitive interview. First of all, it just needs more time. You got to sit down with the eyewitness, make them feel relaxed, and listen to them for a longer period of time. Second of all, it requires special training. So you got to bring in specialists that can train police officers in how to do a cognitive interview. So you have to pay those specialists, and you have to pay for police officers to go off duty to get that training in the first place. So that costs a lot of money. So in conclusion, it might be a good idea to only do the cognitive interview in situations that truly matter. So in very severe cases that that have priority over other cases, it might be a good idea to gather all the information and to go for that extra cost and time to spend that on the cases that truly matter more than others. Leave a like if you liked it, subscribe and hit the bell to get notified when we drop a new video. Download these and many more slides for free, and consider supporting us on Patreon and get access to detailed mind maps and past exam revision content. If you're a teacher, get free access to ZenTeach, an online quizzing tool with ready-to-go multiple choice quizzes and automated feedback. Make sure to use this invite code, which is, like all links, in the video description below.